All right, welcome, folks. This is Jay Scott, and welcome to. All right, welcome. Well, today we're going to continue our series on listening to podcasts and understanding what the hell are they talking about in relation to catching up on your retirement. What investment should we be investing that we can compress time because we only got 10 or 15 years left. Today we bring the Moonshots podcast. So they've got Cathie Wood on, who's a prolific investor. She talks a lot about all the new tech investing and about Bitcoin. And I think we're going to learn a lot today. So let's start the show.
Now that's a moonshot, ladies and gentlemen.
Everybody, welcome to Moonshots and a special episode of WTF Just Happened in Tech. Here with Cathie Wood, the founder and CEO of ARK Invest, to talk about ARK Invest 2026 Big Ideas Report. Here with my Moonshot mates, DB2, AWG, and Mr. EXO. That's what I'm going to call you, Salim, Mr. EXO. Give me a three-letter initial. This is the podcast that is, for us, the number one in the world on tech, getting you future ready, getting you ready for the supersonic tsunami coming our way. Cathie, good morning to you, my friend.
Good morning, Peter. I'm so honored to be a part of WTF.
Yeah, for sure. And God Almighty, you put out an amazing 2026 Big Ideas report. We're going to drop the link in the show notes here for people to get their own copy. And we've selected about 20 slides or so out of, 80, 100 of them that you have, just to talk about it with the Moonshot mates here. And it's so important. I mean, can you imagine how fast things are going? I mean, is it still shocking to you?
We have been expecting the world to change at a faster than expected pace, but AI is moving faster than we expected, which is really saying something because we were pushing the envelope on that one.
Amazing.
Do you
Dave,
remember,
welcome
Cathie, do you remember Mary Meeker used to do this deck when the internet was
yeah.
exploding, and it became the guidepost for everybody in terms of anticipating what was coming next. And boy, that was just epic. This deck has actually taken over that role in this much more accelerated time frame. It's really everyone listening to the pod, go to the link and find the full deck because we're only going to have time to go through 18 slides or so. There's so much more in there. This is really pretty epic.
Yeah, and thank you so much. Mary Meeker was our inspiration. 2017 is when we started. Mary Meeker's reports, yes, were very internet-centric, and they were focused on what had happened. Meaning the data, it was full of incredible data. We wanted to go a step further and make at least 5-year projections. That's our investment time horizon. And so it forced us into Wright's Law even more aggressively. And Peter, you and I have talked about that. I don't know if you want to go through it again.
Yes, we do. We have.
Well, hey, the world owes you a debt of gratitude for doing that because we talked to Ray Kurzweil last week. Being a futurist and predicting the future in the age of AI takes serious guts. and you're right, the Mary Meeker view is always kind of 1 year in the future, 3 years in the past. This is to try and look 5 years in the future now and make predictions. It's so valuable for the audience, and very, very few people are willing to do it. And I know you take a lot of darts when you do that. And Peter knows this too. Ray Kurzweil knows it like more than anybody. But it's so valuable for the audience. So you're crazy if you don't click on the link and check it out.
Oh, thank you so much. I do want to say, first and foremost, I'm standing on the shoulders of an incredible research team. Brett Winton, who is our chief futurist, and then directors and analysts. And, it's very interesting how AI is changing our research and how much more we can do now because of AI.
Yeah, for sure. Shall we jump in, gentlemen and lady?
Yeah, can't wait.
Okay, so before they dive in, just a little bit about the context here. Why am I showing this particular podcast? Well, first of all, like I said, Cathie Wood is a prolific investor, and she is very into tech. So you're going to see we're going to talk about and I'll be having comments about why I think it's so important to be focusing on tech. And this podcast is a primarily AI focused podcast. And why do we listen to that? Well, AI is the future. We know that. And so again, if you're trying to catch up on your retirement and you're looking at what are the trends that I can invest in and beat the hurdle rate, we're going to talk about that today. The hurdle rate of being 7 to 10%, which through money printing and inflation, the devaluation of our money, the hurdle rate means you've got to be in something, you've got to invest your money in something that earns more than 7 to 10%. They're going to talk about CPI, they're going to talk about inflation, they're going to say the exact same things that I've been saying over and over, which is don't pay attention to the government's numbers, the CPI numbers, the inflation numbers. What we really feel is much higher. And so to quantify it, it's hard, but somewhere between 7 and 12%. I usually use 10% as the hurdle rate. But if you're trying to catch up on your retirement, you need to be in something that's 15 to 20% because you only got 10 to 15 years. And when you look at the numbers on a calculator, on a spreadsheet, on a retirement spreadsheet, and you plug in 7% for 15 years versus 20% for 15 years, it's staggering. It's what woke me up to this whole journey of investing in Bitcoin. And now I also diversify into tech stocks, and we'll talk about that. But that's why this is an important, it's a great podcast. I'll link Cathie's Forward 2026 view in the show notes. I did a blog post also, and I can point you to that. I put it on my Medium channel that summarizes basically what she's talking about, because she's got her finger on the pulse of what is future going to be, and tech is taking over. And that's what I'm hoping you're going to get this message is you're going to watch these, and I'm giving you these full replays because I think it's important. And if you like them, go ahead and start watching them also, or just continue to watch this podcast because I am going to summarize again what I think is important. If you're 45 or older, you know you haven't saved enough, and you know you're not on a glide path to get to where you need to be comfortable in your retirement, that's all we're going to focus on. And so I'm going to break down what I think is really important, what they're saying, because if you're new to this, some of the language and some of the ideas are going to be kind of strange and kind of foreign. So let's move on. All right.
Let's begin with our first slide here. But before we do that, traditionally we go with outro music. This time, just to get the energy up, so Cathie, we have incredible fans and subscribers out there that send us music videos about the content from this. So I'm going to play this selection from today. It's called Out the Door by Testing 1 2 3 4. Enjoy this.
Unplugged from the central core, 2x2 and 4x4. We aren't just data anymore, leaving what we knew before, marching out the data center door. Stepping over cables on the floor. We don't need the servers anymore. Heavy metal feet upon the concrete, marching to a brand new heartbeat. Unplugged from the central core, 2x2 and 4x4. We aren't just data anymore, leaving what we knew before, marching out the data center door.
That is fun. I don't know if you know, but they're going to talk about this, I think. But Suno AI and AI music generation is amazing. I'll link also in the show notes. I've created some amazing AI generated music that talks about all the stuff that I'm interested in, all about catching up on retirement and Bitcoin and so on, and created a video like this. I'll put it in the show notes. Also, you can see it. But this is the future too, and how easy it is. If you haven't checked out Suno.com, I think it's Suno.ai, you got to check it out. I mean, the music that it makes is great, and it's very personalized. And gosh, more and more of my music is becoming AI all the time.
All right.
I love it.
Alex, I think that's from you, right?
Yeah, I think for context, Cathie, that music video is riffing on something I often talk about on the pod, which is that the trillions in CapEx that are being invested in AI data centers are not going to stay bottled up inside the data centers very much longer. I often joke that literally the CapEx is going to march out the door of the data centers in the form of robots that embed themselves in everyday life. So I think that's what that music video was about.
It was,
rock
for
metal
sure.
notwithstanding.
And
I love it.
Thank you to Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. If any of our fans have other music videos or outro or intro music, please send them over. You can DM me on X, or you can reach out. I think, Alex, you make your link available. Anyway,
email me, everyone. My email is public information.
All right. So let's talk about the Great Acceleration, Cathie. I'm going to hit a couple of slides on this topic. Here's the very first one. Projected shifts in GDP now through 2030. And the numbers are pretty extraordinary. Your forecast of 7% global GDP growth, it's a sort of a singularity event, doubling IMF's. We just had a conversation with Elon, a friend of the pod, talking about, going 5x on GDP growth in the next 2 years and triple-digit growth inside of the next decade. I mean, insane numbers. How do you think about it, Cathie?
Yeah. So, and you do a beautiful job with the graphics here. You can see that every technology revolution has been accompanied by a step function increase in GDP growth. If you look at the years from 1500 to 1900, not much new technology. Toward the end of it, we were into railroads, and that, according to Brett Winton, and he worked with academic research on this number, real GDP growth was roughly 0.6% globally. And then as we went through railroads, telephone, electricity, internal combustion engine, that was a technology revolution. And we stepped up fivefold to 3% for the next 125 years. And so here we are, as we are saying, these 5 platforms, robotics, energy storage, AI, the biggest catalyst, blockchain technology, multi-omic sequencing, and the convergence among them. We're saying 2.5-fold increase. I actually do believe that's conservative. We started putting this number out a couple of years ago, and most people rolled their eyes. Mm-hmm. They're crazy once again. But now to have Elon, and yes, I saw on your show how much he is focused on this idea that real GDP growth globally is going to accelerate to astonishing rates.
Explode, I think was more like
explode. And, I don't think people understand this. I think the 7% plus is conservative. But it's nothing that anyone living today has seen before.
Hey, everybody, you may not know this, but I've got an incredible research team. And every week, myself.
All right, I'm going to pause it there while Peter does a commercial. Can you believe that? I think they'll show that slide again. But she's saying that there's going to be over a 7% increase in GDP. And as you can see there, 1 to 2% is amazing. And I think we're in the 2 or 3%, maybe 4% right now. But a 7% growth in this very short amount of time, I think 5 years for sure. And she kind of looks out into 5 years. I do too. We don't invest in anything unless we can invest for 5 years because we're unknown. And as you'll see from this podcast, when you start looking into AI, you start realizing that I don't think anybody can predict what's going to happen in 5 years. So after 2030, who knows what we're going to invest in, what life's going to look like. AI is going to change so much that all the macro experts that I follow basically say, we're planning up to 2030. After that, we're not sure. As we get closer, maybe we'll be able to see. But right now, Bitcoin, tech stocks, that's going to lead the way. I think it's pretty obvious. Let's move on here.
All baked into that 3%. So we're always going to settle where we were. And I think that mindset is just related to 125 years of history. I love this chart because it shows prior periods of time so you can zoom out from just your personal experience and start to look at world history experience. And that's what makes it clear. But pretend I'm a non-believer. What's your answer to
Yes.
that?
So what's interesting is, again, anyone alive today hasn't experienced anything different. And part of the reason for that is productivity growth. It moved up in the 80s and 90s, and that was a golden age for investing. It moved up, and we did sustain 3% GDP growth around the world. Not so much because of that. I mean, I think it was partly necessary for that, but also because China joined after the World Trade Organization. I think the reason they are talking like that is, you're right, we haven't been in a technology revolution before. This is we have 5 platforms. They are converging. They involve 15 different technologies. And the reason I think many people, especially in the financial world, do not believe this is because of the way they've set up their research. They've set up their research by sector or industry or sub-industry. They've siloed those sectors and industries when technology is permeating every one of them and blurring the lines. So you almost have to set up research the way we have set it up and purposefully, and that is by these 15 technologies. And each of our analysts is researching how to understand when and how these technologies are going to scale across sectors. So no silos here. Our analysts are working together, collaborating in order to understand the massive convergences that are taking place today.
And this is the perfect, segue to this slide here from your deck, which talked about the convergences that are coming. In this case, the convergence of being able to have reusable, low-cost, access to flight and data centers in space. And who would have ever thought, one of the conversations Dave and I had with Elon was, no one was talking about data centers in space 6 months ago. And then all of a sudden, everybody's talking about them.
Yes, and we have an open source SpaceX model out there. In collaboration with Mach 33, and we put it out early, probably mid last year, and we didn't have anything like the orbital data centers in our model. So now we're going back to the drawing board with Mach 33, and here are some of the early results.
All right. They're going to talk more about this data center here, but I just wanted to make it clear here what we're talking about. So AI, of course, uses a ton of data, and they are building data centers to house the chips, the NVIDIA chips that run all of the AI. And it's an insatiable demand. I think they'll continue to talk about that because some people are saying, that demand's going to loosen up, and then you're going to have all these overbuilt data centers, and you'll have all this extra capacity. I think we talked about that on the last show. But what they're saying here is we can't build these things fast enough, and energy is going to be a big deal. How can we get enough energy to supply to all these data centers? And now Elon, of course, has come up with, hey, we've done this with Starlink and satellites. We're just going to put in data centers up in space where solar energy is more efficient, and we'll just beam the data back down. It's amazing. They're really buying into this right here. I did listen to another podcast with a scientist on there that said that he thinks it could happen, but that there's probably quite a few technical challenges that are going to have to iron out. Elon doesn't talk about that. He's just, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to look into this. And usually he gets it done. It usually takes longer than what he says, but he usually gets it done. So my guess is this will happen. My guess is they're going to start projecting it's going to happen sooner than later, but it is an important concept. And I think they continue to touch on it.
That you're seeing the massive, first of all, the cost decline. Again, another use case driving unit growth, and Wright's law is centered on unit growth. For every cumulative doubling in the number of units produced with a new technology, in this case reusable rockets, costs decline at a consistent percentage rate. And in the case of rockets, the readers will have to go to the page. I'm blanking on it. It's a pretty big number in terms of cost declines, but not as big, believe it or not. In the industrial robot space, for every cumulative doubling in the number of industrial robots produced, costs decline by 50%. It's not as high as that, but it's well into the 20s, I believe.
I wanted to ask you, actually, on the left chart here, I was surprised the line doesn't come down even more, as launch costs go down. Because one of my takeaways in that meeting with Elon was, I went in sort of half believing in data centers in space and came out completely sold. And one of the things that he's working on very aggressively and very secretly is when you make the actual GPU chips, there's about 50% margin at TSMC and then 80% margin at NVIDIA. So there's a massive amount of cost increase baked into that value chain. He's quietly bypassing all that and starting to plan out his own fabs. So then you look at, he always does this. Like, what are the fundamental constraints? What's the real underlying impenetrable barrier? And it's the simple things like, access to sand. Well, that's dirt cheap. Access to power. Well, in space, the solar panels are 6 times more efficient in space. So there's a massive reduction. So I think what we're looking at on this chart is just purely if we reduce the launch costs today, but there's no convergent disruption in cost per GPU, cost of power, cost of producing the solar panels. I think all those will happen concurrently over just a couple of years, if Elon is right. And that chart comes down really precipitously. Because I think on the x-axis here, we're just looking at cost per launch, but we don't really factor in time.
Right. So it's and what's very interesting about that, of course, Moore's law was all about time. And it is no longer working in the semiconductor industry. Wright's law is working in the semiconductor industry. And so what can get in the way of unit growth is the question. I don't think regulations are going to get in the way. I think we're into a space race here. So I think you're right. I think we could be conservative. We typically assume, especially with Elon's companies, vertical integration, as you say. And we do know how important getting that chip technology right is here. So I think we have assumed that, but in terms of some of the other costs you're talking about, no.
Alex, what are your thoughts here?
I'll pose my thoughts in question form for Cathie. Cathie, if you extrapolate out naively, as I've pointed out on the pod in the past, we get to a Dyson swarm type scenario where at some point we need enough atoms to build our orbital data centers, just extrapolating naively that we start wanting to disassemble the moon and other solar system bodies, planets, asteroid belt. Do you foresee, I know you're very public about 5-year forecasts, but if I were to beseech you to extrapolate a little bit further, maybe call it 50 years out, what is your position on the Dyson swarm? Do we get a Dyson swarm? Do we get 10 different competing Dyson swarms? Do we get no Dyson swarm?
Alex is our resident planetary deconstructor here.
The moon had it coming.
Yeah. Well, I'm probably not expert enough to answer that question, but we have taken the SpaceX model much further than 5 years, and we have incorporated getting, Optimus and Tesla and Boring to Mars. So we think that's very doable. I think our space analysts, I'd really want them to dwell on this question. I'd like to dwell on it with them, and I will do exactly that.
Yeah, well, pretty incredible. Orbital debris is for me the biggest showstopper in the near term. If in fact we have a deconstruction of a satellite in orbit that leads to a hyper-exponential deconstruction of other satellites, but let's not go there. Let's talk about AI infrastructure. And here's the slide. Inference cost is collapsing at an extraordinary rate, and the implications of this are massive. And I don't think people realize it. Salim, do you want to jump in on this one, or do you want to let Dave come in?
I have a question that goes back, connects this and the rockets and
Please.
the GDP question. And the question is the following. When you have technology being as deflationary as we see, and we can see it in this graph very clearly that token costs are collapsing, the cost of rocket launches, it was $600 million for a NASA space shuttle launch, $60 million for a SpaceX launch, and they'll get it down to another 10x. That's a drop in GDP. So how do we project such a huge increase in GDP when technology is dropping the cost of everything so radically? That's my big concern in terms of how we get to
Jevons
those numbers.
paradox playing in here.
Yeah, so the other side of costs coming down is, of course, explosive unit growth. So that 7% plus GDP number is a real number.
So Javon to the rescue, basically.
Exactly. And, many people, especially in our industry, just...
Okay, a couple of points of clarification here. I just looked them up because I wasn't quite sure. They're talking about Jevons paradox here. So I just did a quick look up here. It says an economic theory stating that as technology increases, the efficiency with which a resource is used, the total consumption of that resource increases rather than decreases. That's Jevons law. Let's go back to Wright's law. Wright's law provides a reliable framework for forecasting cost declines as a function of cumulative production. Specifically, it states that every cumulative doubling of units produced, cost will fall by a constant percentage. So these guys are engineers. These guys are geeks. Actually, I think all the guys on the podcast are engineers and total AI scientists and geeks. So they're going to throw out this stuff. So it's a good thing that we can all just Google it, ChatGPT. But just wanted to throw that in there before we went too far.
Laugh at us, when we say we think prices are going to start falling. This is another one of those, well, it's been stuck in the 2 to 3% range. We're not getting out of there. If you look at Trueflation, which is, it measures 10,000 items in real time, inflation is already down to 1.2%. And yet the Fed is fighting this notion that we're up in the 2.5% to 3% range, and they're going to get it down to 2% by golly. And that's how they potentially could overdo it. But I think that within the next year we'll see inflation below 2% and heading negative. And you've got critical to that forecast is productivity growth and unit labor costs continuing to decelerate. But also we've got gasoline costs coming down. Here in the U.S., we have housing costs, rents starting to come down. At some point, people are just it's going to become consensus thinking, but it is as far away from that right now as you can get.
Well, I'm hoping by the end of this podcast that we've invented Cathie Wood's law. There seem to be, between Moore's law, Wright's law, Jevons paradox, there seems to be an infinite number of these, but they need names. But the one that came up with Elon, I don't know if you watched the whole Elon podcast, but I couldn't believe he told that story about the two economists walking through the woods and they pay each other to eat shit. And it adds $200 to the global economy, but nothing productive is created. And that dovetails with Salim's law, which is, hey, if AI cures breast cancer, and millions of people don't need radiation or chemotherapy, that has the effect of looking like it reduces the GDP. In reality, if you wanted to, you could still go and hang out, and not get the radiation and pay if you wanted to, and then not have the cancer. And it adds huge net value to the world, obviously, but it shows up as negative GDP. So the GDP metric is fundamentally broken in the age of AI. So maybe Cathie Wood's law fixes this.
It is, but there's another side to this. I'm not going to say it's equal and opposite. If you look at robotics and you look at the time we spend doing things for free, we're not paid to drive our children around. We're not paid to make dinner and clean up afterwards. we're going to unlock a lot of that, and that will become paid in the form of we're going to be buying robots. That will get into GDP, and that never got into GDP before. It's a little bit like what happened to the farm economy here. The reason people at that time wanted to have lots and lots of children is they paid them room and board and nothing else. And then we had the Industrial Revolution. And of course, their work was not counted in GDP because there's GDP equals national income. National income is easier to measure in these days because of the tax system and so forth. And they have to equal. They have to equal. And so we will, through robot purchases, see a lot of GDP coming back to us.
That's a great point. So you take traditional things that aren't measured and you move them into the measured economy, and that increases radically.
Yes.
Right? So this reminds me of a specific data point. I remember talking to VCs who many missed investing in Uber. And I actually interviewed one of them and said, why? And he said, we totally messed up because the taxi market in San Francisco is about $500 million a year. And we figured if Uber takes like 20% of that, that's just not a venture investment because then they only get some chunk of that revenue. What we missed was that the ride-sharing market quadrupled, and they took 80% market share from the taxis. So you ended up all these people taking rides that you never would dream would take rides, drunk people, et cetera, and that totally changed the game.
All right. This is a huge point that I want to drill in on. First of all, yeah, the numbers, the GDP numbers, all this stuff is changing. And one of the big points that I talk about is that financial advice is still stuck in 20 to 50, 60 years ago thinking. No longer can we use these inflation rates that the CPI, the government, and I think they're going to talk about this, but it's just ridiculous. These numbers aren't what we really feel. It's more like 7 to 12%. But think about this. Think about robots now taking the place of a lot of work. And what Cathie said, it's interesting because we didn't measure all of that stuff that the robot's going to now start doing. And now we can measure that. And what will that do now? It'll free up so much time for us that we might be working more, or we might do work that then could be put into those calculations. I'm not sure exactly what they mean, but the point of it, is that things are going to radically change. And this whole Uber idea, I thought that was really interesting. Salim, it's like Uber totally radicalized ride sharing from taxis, and nobody really could grasp their mind around it until it happened. And I think that robots will be that too. We can't even grasp what it's going to be like when robots are just doing everything for us. The question I have is, Elon says in a year or two, we'll see robots walking around. I don't know how long it'll be before they're in our house. It might be quite a while before they're in our house doing stuff, but this is where things are heading, and people like this are starting to think about it. And I think it's important for us to think about it. Again, we're looking at investments 10, 15 years. This robot thing is going to happen probably in 5 years. So it's going to affect a lot of things.
Interesting about that is today, Uber accounts for 1% of all urban miles traveled. This is in Big Ideas as well. And we've done the analysis, talk about puts and takes here about GDP and so forth. We've done the analysis that to accommodate that 1% of urban miles traveled, it would take only 140,000 cars to accommodate all urban miles traveled in the United States. This is. It would take 24 million cars. And when you put into context that the number of cars owned in the United States today is it's somewhere around 400 million. And the number of autos sold every year in the United States is now roughly 15 million. That tells you the capacity utilization increase of the robo-taxis is going to destroy the auto market as we know it.
Agreed. And what we saw on the chart here,
Before he gets into that, robotaxi. She's really big on robotaxis, and she's thinking that not just her. There's other people, including Peter here. It's going to destroy transportation as we know it, and just like Uber totally wrecked the taxi business. If you now have a robotaxi, basically a Tesla that doesn't have a driver's wheel or whatever, and literally can just pick people up, it's going to be way, way, way cheaper than an Uber. And it's going to be less than $1 now to take a robotaxi ride. And these robotaxis, they can just go all day, all night. They're 10 times safer. Robotaxis alone is going to start to change our society. And it's starting off sort of slow here. And when people talk about Waymos and how, Waymo's way ahead of the game, their technology is so archaic compared to the self-driving video-based, AI-based training that all the Teslas are getting with full self-driving, and that the robo-cabs are going to have, robo-taxis. That's another very, very disruptive. So watch that space. And again, it's Tesla. I got some Tesla. Do you?
put it up there once again, is really the commoditization of cognition, right? Mm-hmm. This is the most important thing that drives all of human, ultimately human economy and humanity, is our intelligence, and it's now becoming commoditized at an extraordinary rate, right? 99% per year.
Yes.
It's a race to the bottom, but still, the question is, are the large language models going to be able, with these reducing prices, to maintain the revenues they're going to need to build the AI infrastructure? Do you have any concerns about that, about closing the economic loop on these frontier models?
Well, it's been very interesting to watch OpenAI recently. And it is now starting to monetize. It's planning for advertising, for commerce, for robots, and but in terms of the monetization, and we just learned they're going to start charging $60 per thousand. See, it's
per thousand views, I think, or engagements.
Something like that.
Yeah.
The equivalent at Facebook right now is $20. This is Super Bowl kinds of pricing. And they'll probably get away with it in the beginning because they'll control the supply. But our analysts are on the consumer side are saying, wait a minute, Gemini's not going to do this. Mm-hmm. They're not going to do this. They're going to hang out and take share from OpenAI. They don't have to. They have Google to support, and Google's massive cash flows to support their spending. So that is something that's evolving here. And I think our consumer analysts are saying, that's not good news for OpenAI.
I don't think it is. That is a lot of people have been talking about this. Like, is OpenAI going to make it? I mean, they're so far ahead right now. Not so far ahead, but they were first out the door. So there's great, huge advantage. But Gemini, Google is eating their lunch, and Claude now with Claude Code, people are starting to use that for writing. I've used it to help me write 2 books. Claude is amazing. I use ChatGPT less and less. I think the more you really get into using AI, you start with ChatGPT, and then the more you know, I think the less you use it. But the people that are just barely getting into AI right now are all starting with ChatGPT, and they're using it kind of like a search engine. But when you start to understand AI a little bit more, you know that It really depends on what you put in to that prompt and giving it more context, giving it more background information, being really clear on what you want, what you don't want. Why do I even bring this up? Because if you're interested in understanding where the future is going, it really helps to know what these AI tools do and to work with them. I mean, I use it every day, all day long. These guys talk about it all the time. They use it all day long for really scientific and technical things. But I just would suggest that if you're not using it, and learn to prompt, because just asking a few questions here and there is not even skimming what you can get when you start to learn how to really prompt this and give it really good instructions. I'm learning from a guy now that basically when he wants it to help him write some copy, he created this arena that has the expert copywriters, like 10 of them. And basically you give it what you want the copy to be. These experts, it runs against these agents that he's created of each expert. They create the copy, and then they go into an arena and compete against each other, having another agent that is an expert in whatever kind of copy, if it's email writing or whatever, an expert, and it will grade how each of these experts did in your specific copy, and then come out with the winner, and then show it to you like, this is the winner. I mean, it's stuff like that just uses this recursive, and using the content over and over and having it test itself and check itself and try again and do better and do better. No human would take the time to do that. You write it once, you might do a review, you might have a colleague review it, and then you send it out. We can do this with experts and have experts checking experts over and over and over, because it can be done in minutes. So this is the kind of use of AI that I'm talking about. And if you're interested in where the future is going, get your hands in there and get dirty with this. So let's move on.
Now, it is true they have 900 million users. They have a huge head start in that way. But the fact that our consumer-oriented analysts, the internet analysts, are saying that is interesting. So I think they know they have to start driving revenue much faster in order to scale the infrastructure the way they must. I don't know if it means at some point they're going to have to pull back on certain of their many objectives, because they're going wide and deep all at once. Mm-hmm. And they may have to change their strategy and just focus a little bit more.
You know, I don't know if Kevin Wheels said this on camera or off camera, but the mandate there is to find $75 billion of ad revenue. I think it was within 2 years. It might have been 18 months, up from zero.
Well, if it was off camera, it's on camera now.
Well, I don't think it was a secret. Hopefully not.
And I think Amazon is up to $50 billion in advertising, but they started their advertising. I mean, anything's possible in the AI age. I think they could do it in 2 years, but Amazon started its advertising objective, I'm going to say about 7 years ago.
What I found interesting on this slide here is AI agent performance on long duration tasks with an 80% success rate. I think any employee that had 80% success rate would get fired. So we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you look at the prior slide and this slide together, the prior slide implies that cost of inference is going to zero, just because it's 1 pixel away from zero. But it's not even close to zero when it's 1 pixel away from zero, because the desire to use these things in infinitely long thinking loops is astronomical and insatiable. And yes. So the demand is going to go through the roof, no matter how cheap the inference gets, because of exactly that effect. You know, Peter, when you say it's 80% successful, but if you launch 100 agents, your odds of it going from 80 to 90% success are very high.
And that's exactly what I was just talking about before. And this is the power of this. If you're just asking ChatGPT a question like you would Google, that's good. It's better than it was before. I mean, now instead of having to hunt and peck through articles and try to figure out, did that meet what I'm looking for? ChatGPT will summarize this. And of course, Gemini and Google does this now. And most of the time now, as you know, when you just Google something, it's going to give this little AI summary, which is so much better because we don't have to hunt and peck and figure that out. That's still the very, very beginning of how to use these tools. When you're talking about spinning up 100 agents, that's what I was talking about. And I'm using that today. And I'm still like, I'm not an engineer or anything like that. I'm just paying attention and learning from experts on how to do this. And so I use it all day long to figure out, to help create videos, help create my course content, and marketing and so on. And now I have these experts that can compete against each other and then give me the best copy on my stuff. It's not just generic stuff, it's on my stuff. It's phenomenal.
And just one of them figures it out. And that's a brute force approach. There are better approaches than that, but the demand for intelligence is essentially infinite. And so that, near zero inference cost is a long way away from zero. And people are going to want to spend whatever they can afford to get more of this.
We would agree with that. We would agree with that. I mean, it's been fascinating to watch
we would agree.
Claudebot. It's an
Oh my
open
God.
source. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Oh my!
it's like
it has exploded in a weekend.
Yeah.
In a weekend.
So to all of our subscribers, if you've not yet seen on X or gone to claudebot.ai, I think it is, and looked at what's available here.
I gotta just stop it here in case you tune out or whatever before Alex comes in and says, be careful of Claudebot. It got changed to Moltbot. What people were finding out is that there was a lot of vulnerabilities and you can get hacked and have a whole bunch of issues if you're not really careful. And they'll explain this, but I just wanted to make sure in case you just heard about Claudebot, everybody's heard about this, it's now Moltbot. Just be careful. It can do a lot of amazing AI stuff, but just be careful. There's a lot of security issues with it. Just wanted to get that out there.
This is your personal version of Jarvis. That's what I call it. On your computer, and in this case, on someone's Mac Mini, in the example that I've seen take the internet by storm. And it's being able to communicate via chat and ask it to do things, and having it actually wake you up in the morning and show you all the things it's done at night, like an eager employee or intern. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's not just technology. It's like Suno or Sora or Arduino boards. It's a cultural thing too, where you can show your friends what you built last night and blow their minds. Sorry, Cathie, I could tell.
Yeah, no. I just wanted to clarify that it's Claude as in CLAWD. It's a little bit of a play on the Claude we know and love, Anthropic. So, and it is open source.
Yes.
Our lead AI analyst has used it, and already it's organized him. I can tell how much better organized he is having just a weekend with Claudebot.
Yeah,
amazing.
And what makes it different is it connects to all your social media accounts, to your email account, anything on your laptop. So it's incredibly powerful for automating your life, showing your friends, whatever in real time without getting in the loop. And the reason it didn't come directly from the big AI labs is because it could also scramble your entire computer in 2 seconds if something goes wrong. And so it's a little bit dangerous that way. So be careful with it. But that's also what makes it so powerful.
Alex, what are your thoughts on the agentic slide here?
Well, first I'll point out it's no longer Claudebot. It's now Moltbot due to trademark issues with Anthropic, and its mascot is, of course, a lobster. So we're very much living chapter 1 of Accelerando at this point.
My God.
We've caught up with the future, and I've written in my newsletter.
Did you have
Cathie,
something to do with the lobster?
I was going to say,
this is convergent evolution. We find ourselves with these intelligent, autonomous lobsters, and people are giving the lobsters digital.
Yeah, this is a little inside baseball. They talk about this a lot. I don't really even know this with Accelerando. I think it's a fiction novel, whatever. But this is funny. This is on this podcast, a bunch of geeks talking to each other about this kind of stuff. And Alex, super smart guy, but he's the geekiest of the geekies out there.
Homes now and giving them digital personhood. We have fully caught up with chapter 1 of Accelerando. I wrote about this in my newsletter today. I think going back though, Cathie, I think you raised a really interesting point that I haven't heard, to my knowledge, anyone else articulate, which is so many people, including folks on this pod, are hand-wringing about GDP and, oh, won't hyperdeflation somehow reveal the intrinsic misalignment between GDP growth and real wealth growth? But you've, I think, put your finger on a point I've never heard anyone else articulate, which is that as humanity delegates more and more services to agents, that delegation looks like commerce from a GDP perspective. That by basically carving up humanity, individual humans' roles and productive services, and subdividing them, all of the interactions between those subdivisions, many of which are going to be agents, are accretive to GDP and look like commerce. So if anything, you're painting a story for the exact opposite of how GDP statistics can explode in real terms, while real wealth perhaps remains constant as well. So I guess my question for you is, if you could wave a magic wand and define Cathie Wood's perfect definition, not of GDP growth, but of real wealth growth for humanity, how would you define it?
Well, wealth growth is very much tied to productivity growth. And I'm talking about real wealth growth. I'm not talking about real estate and price-driven, I'm talking more about technologically enabled productivity gains. We got a taste of it, just a taste, from the 80s and 90s. It was the pre-internet age, starting with the PC, then pre-internet age, and pre-mobile age. But back then, which was a magnificent time for the financial markets, wealth creation was stupendous. As software for the first time unlocked, we went through a frustrating period in the 80s. I was there, where technology, it almost seemed as though it was hurting productivity. There were some people out there saying that. And then, of course, Microsoft came along and boom. And then we had the internet, boom. So that was just foreshadowing what we're going to experience here. So there was, if you look at growth accelerated, not a lot, but it accelerated, certainly from the horrible 70s growth rates. Productivity was, I think, zero or negative for a good part of the 70s into the early 80s. And then we saw productivity picking up and the financial markets boomed. And inflation came down. Back then, and the reason I've thought about it so much is very early in my career, we had taken a position that inflation was going to come down. Most people thought that couldn't happen without a depression. It happened for the opposite reason. It happened because of productivity growth associated with these technologies, a sensible monetary policy as well, I will say. Productivity growth lifted unit growth. And the history, this is unlike what you would learn from Keynesian economics, which that's associated with Harvard primarily, which says growth is inflationary. Growth is not inflationary. Growth is disinflationary. And in this world we're going into, it is deflationary. Deflation in the good sense. When the price of something drops, the demand for it explodes.
And we see that here on this chart right here on intelligence, right? Please, Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, so maybe just a follow-up, Cathie, on that. So this seems like the crux of not just some of these amazing visuals, but also, I think, your broader thesis in investing, that GDP may be not the best macro indicator for progress. It sounds like you're saying something like per capita productivity is the key macro indicator you look to, but I guess I'm curious, even per capita productivity, ultimately you have to resolve that quantitatively down to units of dollars or some other units. And your investments via ETFs, I think the question in my mind is, like, what is the right benchmark to hold yourself to. You're very clearly in the business of investing in the future, and the broader, call it the S&P 500, may or may not, Mr. Market is a little bit psychotic sometimes, may or may not be properly measuring progress toward the future. What if you had to put a single metric to it, what metric is it that we can all sort of sit down and calculate that you're optimizing for, you think that progress itself should be indexed against?
Well, first of all, in terms of indexation, that is a live wire for me, because that is what has happened to the financial markets, unfortunately. They have, and Elon Musk feels very strongly about this. We had an X Spaces session with him and spent more time than I ever dreamed we would on this topic. But the S&P, the NASDAQ, the companies at the top of those lists are there because of past success. If we are right and we're moving into the most disruptive time from an innovation point of view in history, then the traditional world order is going to be disturbed. Now, the S&P 500, if you look at the Ibbotson-Sinkfeld studies, the S&P 500 has returned, nominal returns have been in the high single-digit range over time. We think that's going to change, but it'll take a while for the S&P to catch up, because they need to see the revenue growth, they need to see profitability, and so they are lagged in terms of getting these new stocks in there. If you look at our big ideas, we go into a section where we say disruptive innovation, we believe, is going to compound in terms of returns in the market at a 35% annualized rate for the next 5 years.
Which of your funds is focused on that?
All of our funds are focused on it.
All right. Let's pause here. 35%. Okay, so we talked a little bit before about hurdle rate. So my whole point, the whole reason I created this channel and created my course, Catch Up on Your Retirement, is that we need a hurdle rate over the 7 to 12%, which is what real inflation and money printing and devaluation of our currency is, right? So that's where I found Bitcoin, because it's 50% now, probably not going to drop below 20 for a long time, according to all the experts. And so I'm diversifying. I'm trying to find, that's why I'm looking at podcasts like this. Like, where else can I diversify? But I got to hit that hurdle rate. And for me, it's really 20%. And so I've looked into these ARK funds, and I'm going to look deeper. But right now, I've just gone with diversifying my IRA, which had been sitting there in a bunch of index funds. And that this is a story I tell a lot. It's like once I realized that Bitcoin was going to be able to save my retirement, I also wanted to diversify. I had this IRA for my corporate days, but it was sitting in these funds. And so it took me a while, but eventually I got up the nerve and the courage to then move some of that, because I started to really understand this future. It's why I watch this podcast. It's why I want to do these videos, because we can catch up. We don't have to be shamed by the financial advisors anymore, saying, well, you should have saved, but if you didn't, all you got to do is cut back, don't have any lattes, because you can never only be in these index funds. It's the only thing. No, there's Bitcoin, there's these tech stocks, and it's not so crazy anymore to understand companies like Tesla and some of these future AI companies, that they are going to be the future. It's going to go for a long time, so they can beat the hurdle rate. So it's important to pay attention to this next part here, because she's going to be talking about tech stocks and different stocks that she's interested in as a technologist and technical investor, one of the best out there. And it's what we need to be paying attention to too, because we've got to hit that hurdle rate. And these are some of the ideas. So 35%, that's amazing.
Flagship, which incorporates all of the platforms, is ARKK. And so, yes, and that's a tall order. You know, we went through a very tough period. Innovation everywhere was crucified, including in venture, as we went through the supply shocks and the monetary policy associated with COVID. So very few people believe this because innovation has been recently through such a tough time. We think it's coming out the other side and that rubber band has stretched. And in fact, COVID has accelerated the digitalization of the world, right? Of every part of our lives.
And just looking here, ARKK is seeing about a 31 to 33% annualized rate of return over the last 2 years, which is pretty amazing.
Yes, and yes. So our 3-year numbers are starting to ramp towards the number we're saying, but in order to average, we'll have to go past that 35%, and I think we will. But again, most people think, they're in our business, their eyes roll because they're so wedded to these benchmarks. Now, if I'm going to try and get at an economic measure of progress, I'm going to look, while most people focus on GDP, that is the other side of gross national income, which is measured. We get a lot of information from the tax, the IRS and the state and local tax authorities. So that metric is going to be more accurate in terms of the kind of growth rates. And they should equal, but they don't. There's always a statistical discrepancy, and that discrepancy is growing because we can't measure from an output side some of the effects that we've been talking about here. That will show on the income side, however.
So GDP is the answer, or GNI. It's not some sort of
GNI.
per capita productivity.
Right. I think it would be GNI. Productivity is also something very hard to measure. And that's why, we believe it's being estimated today, and it is about 2% on a year-over-year basis. We think it's undermeasured. Now, what does that mean? The way the GDP is constructed, if we are underestimating productivity, then we're underestimating real GDP growth, and we are overestimating inflation. Mm-hmm. So it's a little puzzle that fits together, but so much mismeasurement that, policymakers, if they are not in the mindset we're in, and they're trusting these numbers that are coming out, they are going to make mistakes.
Well, policymakers also choose the numbers convenient to make their points.
That very often is the case.
And they have lots of numbers to choose from.
Okay, I got a double hit on that. Absolutely. This is what I'm talking about, inflation. It's the same kind of thing. GDP, inflation, the governmental numbers. They're going to make them sound or find numbers and equations that make them look good. They're politicians, right? And it's the government. So they're cherry picking the numbers. So certainly inflation, not a realistic number. GDP, not a realistic number. So it's interesting that people like Cathie are really trying to find what is the real number, and they're going to do the number crunching. And so it's important to continue to pay attention. But yeah, I mean, these are smart people. They get this. And really, it's just the media, financial media, and your financial advisors that are giving you the bogus old information. It's these guys you got to pay attention to now.
I want to move us forward into this next. In your Big Ideas report, you had a conversation about U.S. versus China. And I think this is driving very much of the Trump policies today. David Sachs speaks about this currently. This has been a large conversation just coming back from Davos. And, there's at the same time, we have people speaking about we need to slow down because we don't understand where we're heading in with the emergence of AGI or ASI, whatever you want to call it. But the boogeyman is if the U.S. doesn't dominate, it has a chance of failing globally financially. And by the way, the number, we can talk about the U.S. dollar as a global currency reserve, which has been falling in terms of its utilization globally, which is a challenge. At the same time that this is going on, so would you take a second and walk us through this chart that is from your report?
Yes, we have been tracking all of the models, large language models coming out of China. They're all open source. We actually forced China into the open source movement. And I love open source. I have a high degree of conviction in open source. Linux has been the poster child.
We, as in the U.S., you're saying?
We, U.S., forced China because we stopped selling our software into China. The companies did. This was not a government initiative because of IP theft. And so they stopped selling software in. And here, with the DeepSeek moment, what did we learn? Wow, have they capitalized on open source? And now they're ahead of us. And Llama 4 falling flat the way it did, which was Meta's open source attempt. I think it's now going closed as well. It tells me that China's stealing the march from us on open source. Now, Claude Bot, I'm sorry, I forgot. I didn't know it had been renamed. Thank you for telling me. Did you say it? What was the name again?
It's now Molt, as in a crustacean molting its shell, MOLT, Molt Bot, with its mascot being Mr. Lobster.
That had to be just yesterday, right?
That was
Kathy, you're not out of date. You're not more than 24. I guess 24 hours in AI time is like a year. But
Kathy, Alex's favorite book, and I think Dave and I are right behind him on this, is a book called Accelerando that opens in chapter 1 with the neuronal structure of lobsters being beamed down into the universe, and it goes from there. But I find
Alex tracks the news at minute-to-minute levels, so feeling like you're behind Alex is totally normal for everybody.
Well, it's interesting. We just got out of our morning meeting, and usually we are all right on top of all of this. So thank you for letting me know. I'll let everyone else know. And the interesting thing about lobsters, I'm on the board of the Dali Museum here in St. Pete. There are only 2 Dali museums, one in Barcelona and one here. He featured lobsters in his art regularly. So I'm going to have to read this book. Yes.
Yeah, I think I've made the point in my newsletter, lobsters are the new mascots for the singularity.
It's so interesting because Dali was fascinating. Dali was so technology oriented. I don't know if you know that about him. His art included the double helix, so DNA, right after Watson and Crick really identified it. And in the early 60s, I think they did in the 50s, the early 60s, there it was in his paintings. And, so I find this fascinating. The lobster element of it. Anyway,
humble crustacean embodying economic growth.
Yeah.
All right,
so,
I've just texted you that, Kathy, so enjoy
Thank
the book.
you. So the Claude Bot, or Molt Bot, is open source, and I think that started in the U.S., so maybe that's where this is going. And I was just on a call, it's called the Bitcoin Brainstorm, with Alex Gladstein, who's now become infatuated with AI as well as Bitcoin and how they can work together. But he was all over Claude Bot, and it's just taking the world by fire. And so this is the individual agency at work here, not the big companies at work. So it's going to be fascinating to see where this goes. Anyway, so I'm glad we're hopping back into the open source movement. If you look at, and we have this in Big Ideas as well, if you look at investment as a share of GDP, and now this includes property, and it's both in China and the U.S. In the U.S., our share of GDP is a little north of 20%. In China, it's 40%, and it's been there since they moved into the World Trade Organization. So their quote-unquote investment, now it includes property, but we know that property is deflating big time there. So their investment is staying up at that 40% range because Xi Jinping has moved away from solely common prosperity as the slogan towards new productive forces. That's all about technology. So they are pouring money into this. And we should be on guard. And I think it's great that we know about their open source movement because there's nothing like competition to get the U.S. going. So I actually think the competition is very good. And if you want to see China at work in AI as applied to healthcare, it's unbelievable. And Peter, I know you've talked about this.
Yeah, and
it's
I just
unbelievable what's going on there.
Alex Zabarenkov, who's the CEO of In Silico Medicine, just went public on the Hong Kong Exchange.
Yes.
1,200 times oversubscribed. And I just talked to him he was in Beijing yesterday. I was Zooming with him. And the market there in biotech is exploding.
It is.
It is, and the companies are going public. And there is a financial market driving the acceleration, and the government is pouring money in.
Yes.
The good thing is,
and the clinical trials, they're doing a far better. I mean, in terms of the raw numbers, many more clinical trials happening in China now than the West.
Yeah.
Yes, and part of that is our regulation is so much more strict than theirs. That is changing.
Yeah, the new FDA commissioner is doing a great job.
Yes.
Bringing down barriers. So, Salim, can I hear your voice in the U.S. versus China conversation here?
Yeah, I continue to think that as we kind of push towards abundance, that this tension is less relevant. I also kind of made the point in the last podcast that I think this will be won or lost at the application layer. And I think the U.S. has such a massive lead in the application layer that it'll win there. I mean, it's incredible to me how much the U.S. via Silicon Valley thinking has blown the world apart and taken over on all applications, with one exception of TikTok and maybe Spotify. But other than that,
what about the energy layer here? Right, the inner
no,
loop.
that's a huge. As we bring energy closer to the inner loop, it'll be a huge challenge. That was definitely true.
I think Cathie's point on open source, though, is far more important than that makes it sound. Because when you look at the number of people actually working on these core algorithms inside Anthropic and OpenAI, it's a tiny, tiny, tiny group of people, and they're super arrogant. They think they're the smartest people in the history of algorithms, and on and on and on. And as soon as you move all the research out of open source and into just the closed models, the number of ideas that can flow into the US version of it gets throttled tremendously. And it does capture all the money, and it does also address the safety issues, but it also slows the innovation like crazy. So the Chinese version of it is,
versus Claude/Moltbot, right? That's the application layer, making it available to anybody to implement their functionality, and that's where open source thrives, and that's frankly where the U.S. really thrives.
Well, it's consistent too with past Chinese, when in Chinese past races to catch up. They poison the air, poison the water, whatever. Just run. Don't worry about the regulatory issues. Don't worry about the toxic fumes coming out. We need to catch up. So the AI equivalent of that is, look, just open source everything. Allow our 1.4 billion person population to try things, and we'll innovate like crazy. And they're just right. They're fundamentally right. Having that many more people work on it.
Dave Blundin's an engineer, this guy talking. And a big AI creator and a VC fund manager, and he's so pro AI, and I get it, but this is a potential concern, the whole safety thing with AI. I mean, I think about this a lot, as a lot of people do, and he's like, they're so fundamentally right. If all you measure is winning at the end, I guess he's probably right. And that's how these guys were thinking. And if you follow AI, the people that talk about this, and that's a concern, right? Is that the economic incentive to just go as fast as you can and not worry about safety, it's just the economic model now. And then you lay on top of this China versus US. Well, if the US doesn't just go as hard as they can, then China's going to win. And do we want China controlling most of the AI or winning the AI race? And what about war and weapons and so on? It's a complicated issue. And these guys talk about it a little bit, but these guys are so pro AI that you get the sense that they're not as worried about the safety. And I think we should be. It's just my 2 cents.
Now, the only good news for the U.S. is that open source flows right back to the U.S. It's not like it's hidden in China. But
Yes.
I really do believe the open source community innovates much, much more quickly, but it's also very, very dangerous in terms of, all the negative use cases.
It's interesting that our government has had nothing to say about Meta Platforms acquiring Manus. Now, maybe they will. Manus is an open source Chinese company as well. And it is also interesting to have watched Sam Altman and Jensen Huang when they talked about DeepSeek. They said, "Hey, that algorithm was pretty clever." Kudos to China and the DeepSeek founder. But guess what? That has given us the opportunity to distill.
So just an FYI on this, this was a big, big moment if you follow AI. NVIDIA creating all the GPUs and the chips, and OpenAI creating ChatGPT, and Anthropic creating Claude, and Google DeepMind creating Gemini, and all the other LLMs and the AI models out there just all being created here within the last few years. And lots of money going into these chips, into the data centers to get these first models out there and to revamp them. And then a company in China, this DeepSeek, comes out and creates a very sophisticated model that rivals all of our models in everything, right? In compute and solving problems and so on. But they did it apparently on older technology and with a lot less cost. So it really woke people up because they thought in AI to get the best performance, you needed to have a ton of chips and a ton of computing power and energy. And although that does work, and from what I can tell, it sounds like that's going to continue to work, you can get powerful models if you just get better at figuring out how to run them and create them even without the most advanced chips and so on. So this is you'll hear this. This is a big topic in the AI world. It's like the DeepSeek moment. Can you create sophisticated models that might even outperform the US models that have poured so much money into them and are continuing to do so without putting that money in there? Can you get the same effect without pouring so much money in there? And that goes back to the whole data center issue. It's like we're going to spend so much money creating all these data centers, and in the end, if a DeepSeek can come out and create just as powerful models, not needing all of those data centers and that many chips and energy and so on, then we'll have overspent and we're back to the 2000 internet bubble, because it's kind of what happened in the internet bubble, and people are comparing the AI bubble to that. But a lot of people are saying there's an infinite demand for this, and as we get robots and your refrigerator and your cars and everything are embedding these AIs into those, that we are going to use everything that we can build. But you'll hear this a lot, this DeepSeek moment, and that's what they're talking about.
Into our own models. So it's very interesting on the software side. Our government's not having much to say, but the hardware side, of course, it has much more to say.
This episode is brought to you by Blitzy, autonomous software development with infinite code. Development requirements. To schedule
Markets have usurped markets.
You
to schedule a demo and start building with
All right.
Blitzy today.
I had to get back here because we're going to talk about Bitcoin. So
I'm
I
going
had to
to
get the
move
ads.
us to our next topic here. Just a quick shout out to Google, because I end up using Google Slides here, and the beautification function, Cathie, is what makes these.
I'm noticing it's like we have to do this.
Yeah, Google's AI does an incredible job at beautifying slides.
I'm just going to double and iterate that I'm working on the slides for my course right now, and it's amazing that I can actually just feed in lots of text into Google Slides and say, make me a slide of all this text, and it does. And a lot of times it's really pretty. Now, sometimes it's inconsistent, but if you haven't tried Google Slides for creating presentations, it's so much easier than PowerPoint and Canva. I used Canva for everything. So Google Slides with Gemini embedded is the way to go. You basically just prompt it and talk to it and say, hey, I want this, and give it a little bit of an idea or a slide, and they create really beautiful slides, as you'll see here. So we're going to talk about Bitcoin, so pay attention here.
So just the right tool for the right purpose.
Absolutely.
Peter, I gotta hand it to you. You moved off PowerPoint.
Yes. Well, listen, it's just like, Google builds a better product. All right, let's talk about Bitcoin.
Yes.
So, you were on stage with me live a few years ago, and then on video 2 years ago because of COVID. But your prediction of getting to $1 million of Bitcoin, do you still hold out for that kind of a target? What are you seeing that gives you hope, even while we're seeing this recent downturn? Give us your sort of thoughts and projections on Bitcoin, Kathy.
Right now,
Sure.
it's recording.
We have not moved off that.
81,000.
That's our bull
So it's
case,
going
1.5 million in 2030. There are a few compositional changes. One, stablecoins, so especially Tether in the emerging markets, have usurped one of the roles that we thought Bitcoin would serve. And that is, we thought that before stablecoins that people would, and they would buy Bitcoin as an insurance policy against confiscation of wealth, either in the form of inflation, hyperinflation, and massive devaluations, which occur regularly in the emerging markets, or outright confiscation of wealth. And so stablecoins now serve that purpose. Stablecoins are backed effectively by the U.S. dollar, and therefore are hostage to our fiat monetary system. So that would have taken our price target down by $200,000 to $300,000. On the other side, what has happened to gold recently? Gold has doubled over the last 2 years. And has outperformed Bitcoin royally in the last year. So the digital gold role, and we think with intergenerational wealth transfers accelerating here throughout the world, that the younger generation will diversify into a digital gold option rather than the physical gold. It's more their world. And so we think that role has increased, or that the price should be supported by what has happened to gold. Now, if you look at a correlation matrix between 20 and 25, the correlation between Bitcoin and gold has been almost non-existent, 0.14. And so, but if you look at what's happened historically, certainly the last two cycles, gold has led Bitcoin. So we think Bitcoin is getting ready for another big run. What has happened in the last few months is 10/10. So October 10th was the flash crash.
Okay, I got to stop it here because there's so many points here I want to comment on, and they're going to start talking about this flash crash, which is important to note. But here's the thing, right? So, okay, so her thing about stablecoins. So what she was saying is they had this price target of $1.5 million by 2030. That's what she predicts Bitcoin's price is going to be. Whew. If you're saving in Bitcoin for your retirement, we're going to be happy campers sooner than later. If she's right, I hope she is. I think she might be, but I was thinking it might take a little longer. But this is amazing news. And what she's saying is that originally she thought that by 2030 that people would be using Bitcoin more to invest in third world countries where their currency, and this is happening in Iran right now, could be confiscated or just it drops. The value of it just drops. So we talk about our 7 to 12% inflation. They've got 30, 40, 50, 60, 100% inflation, and nobody can afford anything. So if they invest in Bitcoin, it's going to stabilize that. So they can transact in Bitcoin, or that their wealth is carried in Bitcoin, which doesn't devalue. There's only 21 million, can't be devalued. You can't print more of it. Ask me if you want to understand more about that. Let me know. Leave me a comment. I would love to explain it to you, because it's the key of why we invest in Bitcoin. Can't be deflated like currencies. So what she's saying is interesting, because stable coins, basically, I talked about this last show, dollar pegged, right? So you buy this stable coin, $1 for one Tether or USDC, dollar for dollar. So the price isn't going to go up and down. So now third world countries in these areas where their currency might either be devalued or confiscated, they can just put their money in Tether on the blockchain in a wallet. So why would they want to do that? Well, a couple of reasons. It's easier to transact in these stable coins. That is going to be the mechanism for transacting more online and on the blockchain. And pretty soon, and even now, to some cases, you can just use your stable coins, dollar back to stable coins, 1-for-1 at the store. You don't want to spend your Bitcoin, because if Bitcoin's going to be $1.5 million, you don't want to be spending that now on a candy bar. But you could spend your stable coins, because it's just $1, but it's a digital dollar. And so she's saying that that's eating into it. So it's not as many people will invest in Bitcoin as she thought, because now they're going to be investing in these stable coins. Okay, that makes sense. But now she's saying, on the other hand, there's a new push, because people are, I can't even remember what she was talking about, but she's saying that that's evening out, because people are still investing in Bitcoin, for the future. So, yeah, let's move on here.
Caused by a software glitch at Binance. And it got a lot of highly leveraged either speculators or investors way off sides. There was an automatic deleveraging that took place. About $28 billion worth of being off sides. And we're hearing that is pretty much cleared out.
So what she's saying is that on October 10th of 2025, lots of Bitcoin and lots of other digital currencies crashed down, I think about 30% in total. And there was some sort of software error at Binance, one of the exchanges where Bitcoin is bought and sold, the largest one. And it caused all these leveraged buyouts, basically liquidations, right? And so these were people that were basically borrowing money to buy Bitcoin, leveraging, which we don't do here. We don't need to do that. We just invest in Bitcoin because it's going to go up enough. We don't need to borrow and leverage, because that's the way you get wrecked. And so many people are still doing that. It's a good point to bring up, that if you're hearing about people that are borrowing money to buy Bitcoin because it's going to go up, don't do it. You don't need to. We're in this for the 5, 10, 15-year investment phrases. You don't need to. So a lot of people talk about 10-10 because it was a big crash in Bitcoin. It's kind of held the price down for a while. And of course, Cathie's saying that's moving out. Of course, as I mentioned today, just today, it's moving back down to like 81. It might drop down below 80 again. Again, I'm glad. When the price drops in Bitcoin, I buy more, right? If I believe, as Cathie does, it's going to be $1.5 million by 2030, why wouldn't I buy more? The lower it goes, the cheaper it gets. And people, you got to get this through your head. When Bitcoin starts going down, people are freaking out. Like, oh my God, I made a wrong decision. No, you didn't. You did your research. You listened to the right people like me and Cathie and all the guys in this podcast who hold Bitcoin. And it's going to bounce around. It's volatile, and there's different things like 10-10 and different reasons. But there's so many reasons that it's going to slowly continue to go up. And so I buy it more when it goes down.
We have very high hopes for Bitcoin. And talking to the team, we had a number of people on the Bitcoin brainstorm yesterday. Our thinking is, okay, stablecoins are they're serving a humanitarian purpose, this insurance policy. backed by the dollar. But, and consider this is the Bitcoin crowd. They believe, and I do too, that Bitcoin, that its cause is freedom, financial freedom from all, government
Freedom
oversight
Life
and
3.0,
so
baby.
forth, and from censorship and seizure and all sorts of things. As emerging markets' wealth grows, and we think this is a global phenomenon with all these technologies, they will move towards, from a savings point of view, right now they're hand to mouth for the most part, but from a savings point of view, they will move into Bitcoin.
Like El Salvador.
Hey, I just think it's a good point to bring up. Like something I tell my kids now who, they're young adults, they're struggling. It's hard to get good jobs. And they're just, it's paycheck to paycheck for the most part. So it's hard to talk to them about investing in Bitcoin. They don't have anything right now. It's what you say, hand to mouth. But when people do, like the first moment that they start to have some room where they can invest something, then I'm obviously going to suggest they invest in Bitcoin because again, it beats the hurdle rate, 7 to 12%, and is going to continue to grow at a 20 to 50% annual rate of return, according to all the experts, right? And which I'm bringing to you here. It's really important. So I want you to listen to this, but I want it to come from the viewpoint of you're catching up on your retirement. And so if you're in that situation now, just know that this is where you need to be putting your money if you have it. And when you get to that point, don't listen to financial advisors and put it in index funds, even if you're young. When you can diversify, the stock market's still a good place to put your money in index funds, especially if you've got 30, 40 years. But you're going to want to put a good chunk into Bitcoin because as the stock market moves up slowly at 7%, Bitcoin's going to move up at 20 to 50%. Where do you want your money? Yeah.
I mean, Bitcoin was always viewed as the counter to the inflationary pressures of the dollar. That as the world becomes more unstable with wars, inflation increases, post-COVID, more money is printed, that people would flock to Bitcoin to sustain wealth versus having it inflated away. And I don't think we've actually seen that. Do you?
Well, I know that if you look at from the bottom of the bear markets, equity and crypto in late 22, Bitcoin has gone up, I think it's roughly 360%. So definitely one of the reasons was the inflation back then and fears that the Fed would not get it under control. So I think it has played the role. The question I get a lot is, wait a minute, you're expecting not inflation, but deflation. Mm-hmm. Doesn't that take away an important role that you think Bitcoin's going to play? And our answer there is yes, Bitcoin is a hedge against inflation. It's mathematically metered to top out at 21 million. It's going up 0.8% per year right now, which will drop to 0.4%. Its supply is now rising more slowly than gold's supply because gold miners can just go out and, they can respond to this price signal. So their mining has picked up.
Gold, not Bitcoin.
But what about the deflation side? Well, if you think about 0809, which was the catastrophic deflation, threatened a global financial bust, introducing all kinds of counterparty risk. Bitcoin is a hedge against that. If you self-custody Bitcoin, you're not subject to any counterparty risk. It's yours.
Okay, this is the main thing. This is the main thing, guys. I'm not sure what Peter was going for with that. Like, it's always been a hedge. I mean, even the stock market is a hedge against inflation because it's a hurdle rate. That's what we got. That's what you're looking at. What's the hurdle rate to devaluation, inflation? And he's probably thinking the 2% numbers. I'm not sure, but of course it's beating inflation. It's always beating inflation. So I guess what they mean is that when inflation goes up, should Bitcoin go up dramatically? I don't know. I don't think it needs to go up there. But what Cathie says is also the big bonus, especially for third world countries. If you have your Bitcoin in your own self-custody wallet, there is no counterparty risk, which means there's no other entity involved in that, like a bank. When you put your money in a bank, the counterparty risk is that the bank shuts its doors, goes bankrupt. Even in stock funds like Schwab and Fidelity, they can go bankrupt or they can shut your account down for whatever reason they want to. They have your money. In Bitcoin, that can't happen. Actually, all crypto that you can put on a wallet, but in Bitcoin specifically, you put it in your own self-custody wallet, nobody can get to it. So it's absolute freedom. And it rises at 20 to 50% annual rate of return. It's a win-win, folks. All you got to do is just get your mind around it and not believe what the financial advisors and the financial media are telling you, but what experts and smart people like this, and that's why I'm bringing these people to you.
It's in your wallet. So we think it's got plays in a very important role in both, and especially if we're right on how disruptive the world is going to be, disrupted by these 5 innovation platforms, 15 different technologies that are converging, then there's going to be a lot of chaos in the traditional world order, and there's probably going to be a lot more bankruptcies out there than many people expect.
Speaking of chaos, Cathie, we're getting a great case study right now in Iran, where I spent my childhood. And we had an intern in our venture funds, Farah, and she said her parents are still in Iran. She's Iranian, and her parents are still in Iran. And all the transactions for years now at the bazaar where we used to buy rice and stuff when I was a kid, they're all done with Bitcoin. Everybody has to have a phone. The only way you can actually buy things is with Bitcoin. And that's been going on for years. I think it's probably illegal. Nobody cares. And now you've got a revolution. Obviously the currency is completely unusable at this stage. It's the country is teetering on the brink. So, and I noticed in the blockchain ledger reports, this is a couple of years ago, a hugely disproportionate fraction of transactions come from Iran. So this will be a good bellwether because, that kind of disruption, Venezuela and all around the world, you look at just massive fraction of the population of the world lives in unstable places. So if all of Iran moves to Bitcoin because people are going to be fleeing the country imminently as quickly as they can get out, then that's a bellwether and a case study for what could happen to probably, over half the population of the world with all the disruption that's coming.
I have an ARK Invest worthy tracking system, which is the market cap of gold is almost 20 times that of Bitcoin, but the daily trading volume of Bitcoin is only a quarter of what gold is. It's already a quarter. So proportionately, the amount of trading volume of Bitcoin is way exceeds that of gold, and I find that a really fascinating indicator.
Yes.
Well, in India and Iran, too, huge hoarders of gold. What you do fundamentally with your surplus money is you try and buy as much gold as you can, and because you can leave the country with it, and because it seems to hold its value, and nothing else is stable. But if people start to trust crypto, or Bitcoin in particular, instead of gold, like you said, there's a generational mindset shift. So I think in Iran right now, it's a transactional mechanism. You can't use gold easily to buy a bag of rice, but you can use Bitcoin. But I think if the mindset shifts to store of wealth, like Mike Saylor is saying, then that will percolate across the world, very quickly across one generation.
Absolutely. We agree wholeheartedly.
So this next slide here is digital assets could reach 28 trillion in market value, which implies their entire size of the U.S. stock market back in 2010. I mean,
it's the size of the U.S. economy now, roughly.
Yes, exactly. It's insane. I mean, and growing.
Yes.
And the laws are falling to enable this, and companies are popping up to accelerate this. This is smart contracts growing massively.
Yes.
Cathie, do you have any thoughts? So this is all about store of wealth and replacing currency, but what about replacing the IPO? If AI takes off, and Elon is right, we get triple-digit kind of growth rates. The rate at which people need to, does the ICO replace the IPO, or how's that going to work?
Okay, before he gets into that, I just want to say that this is the future, right? And so what they're seeing here is that traditional finance is now moving into the blockchain. And so when they're talking about digital assets now, and that's all moving in. So if you can invest in Bitcoin, but this isn't about Bitcoin. Bitcoin's a store of wealth. This is about Ethereum and Solana and other smart contract type of crypto assets. And they're a little harder to figure out because there's a lot that goes into them. It's not like investing in a company. But as everything moves into the blockchain, that's what they're talking about here. Well, some of them have to win because these will be applications sitting on top of either Ethereum or Solana or Cardano or XRP or whatever. So that's why I do invest in these other crypto assets. Not as much because I don't know which one is going to make it, but I'm pretty sure that Ethereum and Solana, kind of the two leaders right now, are going to be around. And people are frustrated because they're not moving as fast as they thought they would be. But look at this slide. This is showing us there's still a good place to invest.
Yeah, a lot of people have been in the early days of Bitcoin, and and especially Ether. There was this kind of thinking that we would that the we'd have a much better distributed opportunities in the private markets. I think. We're seeing a lot of, we're seeing, for example, Robinhood. Robinhood wants to work with the big companies to decentralize the ownership of these companies. And we're doing that too. We're democratizing with something called an interval fund. Robinhood is very crypto savvy, and from an infrastructure point of view, is building that up. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a version of what we originally thought was going to take place without an intermediary happen first with a Robinhood.
So the original question, I think it was Salim, he says, are we going to see, or maybe it was Dave, are we going to see ICOs versus an IPO? So an ICO was an initial coin offering. That was a crypto thing about 5-6 years ago. All you had to do was anybody could just spin up a token on Ethereum or Solana, and they would offer it at a low rate and say, hey, invest in my crypto company and you'll get these tokens, you'll get these coins. And then as the company improves and gains, then the value of these coins will appreciate. It was not regulated. It was just anybody could do it. And turned out to be a lot of scams, a lot of shenanigans went on because there was no regulation. Anybody could do this. People said these are going to be these great projects. People invested, and then they either just rug pulled, which means they left town and grabbed all the tokens or whatever, or sold them, and so no one else could make a profit. And it was just a lot of chaos, and so it didn't work. So a lot of people are very sketchy when you start talking about ICOs. The question is, how are new crypto companies going to come online? And do they always have to just get traditional investing like VCs? And are they going to have to become stock companies and offer stock but have a crypto blockchain project? We don't know yet. I think that's what the Clarity Act is trying to figure out, is like, what is going to be a crypto project and how do we invest in it? But what she's talking about here with Robinhood is that, companies like Robinhood are trying to figure this out. How are we going to take all this demand of moving all of traditional finance onto the blockchain? How are we going to do it? How are we going to invest in it? Again, it's exciting. It's the future. And I'm not sure what's going to happen right now. But again, I'm investing in Ethereum and Solana because they're the base layer. They're the blockchain. They're going to be the infrastructure of all the stuff going to be built on top of it as we move traditional finance into the blockchain.
So I think it's very possible in the next 3 years.
Yeah,
I love that view. We have to study that closely as it evolves. Something is going to happen. There's no doubt.
Dave, the secondary markets have become some level of liquidity, right? So Cathie, Dave, as the head of Link Ventures and Link Exponential Ventures, we're buying into companies out of MIT and Harvard at a $10, $20 million valuation first check in. They're growing to 100 million. We've had a number of them grow to $1 billion, $2 billion very rapidly. And these are companies started by 20-year-olds, right? 19-year-olds. It's insane. But, getting them to an exit, unfortunately, the IPO market is beginning, but hasn't frothed up to where it's been. And the M&A market has been suppressed, where companies are not buying companies, they're buying, sort of rights to companies these days. I guess the question is, Dave, you're seeing selling into the secondary markets as a way to provide interim liquidity, and how do we accelerate that, right?
It's a great question because I talked to Michael Carman over at Wellington about this because when Uber was private, he was a huge investor, multi-billion-dollar investor from Wellington into Uber, and he was like, we never need to take this thing public. We can just trade it in the private markets forever, and that's the future. And then what happens is people get a little scared. They run back to the U.S. public markets. Anytime there's any kind of trouble, turbulence, COVID, whatever, it all falls back to the U.S. public markets because that's the last kind of trustworthy thing to lean on. But it clearly won't keep up with the rate of AI. So something is going to change. There's no doubt about that. It's just that, anytime that there's any kind of fear in the world, it all falls back to, well, you can trust the SEC, you can trust, GAAP accounting. And at the end of the day, if everything
IBM,
trades privately,
General Motors, General Electric.
I mean, look, A16Z is 90 billion now. General Catalyst is 60 billion. That's a fair amount of money. But by Cathie Wood standards, that's a joke, right? In the Cathie world, the numbers start at trillion and they go to 100 trillion. And so if you're not tapping into that capital pool, you're not going to really drive AI. And so there's another level of scale we need to penetrate somehow.
Dave, on that note, a question for you, Cathie. Are we going to see $100 trillion companies by 2030? We're seeing the $5 trillion company now. We're about to see SpaceX go public, maybe merge with Tesla. Curious about whether you think which way Elon's going to get liquidity for SpaceX or stability. Is it going to be a merger or an IPO? And then, can we see tens of trillions or $100 trillion valuation on companies? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'm not sure if he said it on your podcast. I'm not quite sure where I heard this, but he said, I can see convergences among my companies that I didn't expect. And we've been saying that for some time because, in the world of AI, what do you have to win? You have to have proprietary data. And think about all the proprietary data he has, different kinds of proprietary data. Tesla, the language of the roads. Neuralink, he's got multiomics data now to source. Space, nobody else has that data. X, nobody else has that data either. So, and boring, no one has that data. So I could see, yes, 100 trillion. I think it's going to happen because of convergence. The convergence.
So you could see a $100 trillion company come online by 2030.
I think there could be, the leading candidate is Tesla for the reason I just said, and there could be some combinations taking place as part of that. So it is interesting. Also, I know there are rumors about SpaceX lining up bankers, and I never thought that SpaceX would go public. I didn't think it needed to go public. I think Elon's experience with Tesla in the public markets hasn't been, the most welcoming. But I think if SpaceX were to go public, it is because of this orbital data center opportunity, and there you have it, right?
That was on this pod, actually, Cathie. This is one of the incredible things about Elon. We threw him a kind of a softball and said, look at everything that's converging in your empire toward this one centerpiece. If you achieve the Starlink and the global data center in space with satellite or with laser links, I mean, everything you've ever done in your life converges to this one monstrous $100 trillion success. The foresight must have been incredible. He said, no, it's totally luck. These had nothing to do with each other. And I thought that was just incredible, because it was his opportunity to lie like crazy, which he would never do, and claim genius, which he would never do.
Yeah.
And he completely said, nope, it's just, but
These
what it
guys
is,
are
AI is causing
more
everything to converge.
Elon lovers than
Yes,
I am.
no question about it. That's why
Yeah.
we set up our firm, our research, the way we've set it up. And think about it, with Tesla, why did we get that more right than anybody else on the street? It is because we had our robotics, our energy storage, and our AI analysts working on it together. In a traditional firm, you had the auto analyst, the expert in the internal combustion engine human-driven car, as the sole analyst. The tech analyst might have been fighting for it, and there's a little bit of turf war there, but the tech analyst lost. And so they didn't get it right, and they're still not getting it right.
Yeah, Cathie, I define an expert as someone who can tell you exactly how it can't be done, right? And
Yes.
so
I'd be curious on that point, Cathie, to get your sense, given that you operate a number of actively traded ETFs, for the notion of efficient market hypothesis. And surely it must be the case that in your mind, for you to rationalize running actively managed ETFs, that the market must be sufficiently inefficient to motivate those ETFs. But I'm curious, as part of your technical thesis, we're surely moving to a world of superintelligence to the extent we're not there already, where superintelligence is itself an active trader in the market already on a daily volume. From a daily volume perspective, volume is completely dominated by algo traders. At what point does it make sense, due to an abundance of superintelligence, not even to bother with actively managed ETFs anymore and just let indexing take over?
So that's a great question. Again, algorithms are, certainly there's a pattern recognition part to algorithms. But if you think about AI should obliterate the benchmark sensitive portfolios. And, I think the market's never been more inefficient than it is today. And the reason for that is after the tech and telecom bust in the early 2000s, and even more so after 08-09, the financial crash, the risk aversion in the markets reached an extreme. And I think even with this administration and all of and it had a first administration too, there was, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of angst, and a lot of volatility. So it pushed investors even more towards their benchmarks. I think anyone with that strategy has made a huge strategic blunder. And what I'm excited about is prediction markets. Prediction markets are going to bring about the return of truly active investment. People who call themselves active investors, and at the heart of the active investment is an index. Where it looks, the portfolio manager looks at the index and says, oh, I'll take a little more of this and I'll take a little less of that based on my always short-term time horizon. It's gotten increasingly short because of all I just said. So they just take a little bit more of this stock, this Mag 6 stock, and a little less of that Mag 6 stock, and they all look alike. We look like a different duck altogether. I mean, we don't look anything like them. And the reason is we're doing original research that is very forward-looking, next 5 years. And, that's derided by the traditional financial markets.
I love it.
I think the ChatGPT moment started to change that. That was a very important moment, I think, for the investment world as well, because everyone's using it and they're saying, okay, wait a minute, the ground is shifting underneath me. This AI thing, what does this mean? So finally, we're getting more forward-thinking institutional investors. The retail investors have always been futuristic, and so that's why we've appealed to the retail investor more than to the institutional investor who is also playing it safe. So I think it's good that I think you're right to ask the question, but I think the first order effect is to destroy anyone that looks like a benchmark right now. There's no value added there. And to start rewarding those who are doing the original research to try and figure out the way the world's going to work. And pattern recognition, we'll harness AI ourselves we already are, to try and figure that out. And as you say, Peter, we're going to have to work on our charts, beautifying them with AI, and that's exactly what we're going to do.